craved punishments.
Okay. I also don't want to know what it means.
Oftentimes they would burn her directly with lighters. When they weren't doing that, which is less common than what their chosen punishment was, they would melt straws and drip the molten plastic on her feet. They've melted bottles and did the same thing and waited for them to ooze and pus. And then afterwards, they would take a sharp stick or a textured stick and rub chili oil into her wounds. So Fawn had actually at some point
This is all because of the fucking money that she paid back with interest.
Yes. Yes.
And did you say
reason.
Her husband, though?
She has a husband, yeah. And actually a 1-year-old son
and
as well.
So, were they looking for her while this was happening?
I have no reference on that. Sometimes they would pour boiling water over her feet. They would continue to beat her with sticks and pipes until her ribs broke and she passed out.
I can't believe, she didn't just have a straight up heart attack from the stress.
When the chili oil didn't really do as much as they thought, they grabbed other food items from the kitchen and rubbed them into her infected wounds.
Okay, if you try to ruin sriracha for me, I'm going to be very pissed.
No, I'm drinking sriracha right now. I'm not that kind of asshole.
Was it a themed drink?
No, I just wanted it. Supposedly the 13-year-old, and yes, I know that I'm not using the purported name for her alias, but it's easier, I think, to identify with her age. So she had actually befriended Fawn, but would still beat her and also continuously burn her with the other people that were associated with the triad.
Because she enjoyed it or because she was made to?
Well, here's the thing. Next sentence. When asked why, she said, quote, "Well, I did it for fun, just to see what it was like to hurt someone."
She's also a kid.
Yeah, but I don't remember being 13 and wanting to torture people.
Me either.
Her feet would often ooze pus. Oyster sauce was thrown in her face, and she was made to drink oil often.
Oil?
Like cooking oil.
Oh.
But why?
Because it's disgusting?
I know, but like, of all of the things...
I mean...
You've already done all this horrible stuff to her, man.
I think it was, they were doing whatever they could think would fucking suck.
Yeah. Sometimes when she would lie motionless, Sean would hit her on her chest with a pipe.
Oh.
Sometimes they would make her spread her fingers out on the ground. And then they would strike them until they were broken. They oftentimes kneed her in her chest and her solar plexus, so she would lose air. On one occasion, the 13-year-old had noticed that after one beating where she was suspended from the ceiling, bubbles started to come out of the cuts on her head.
What?
Mm-hmm. That usually means that you're almost hemorrhaging.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Because, your head's not supposed to be open.
Yeah, that's not okay.
On many occasions, they would urinate on her face and force her to smile while doing so, oftentimes urinating into her mouth and forcing her to swallow. When that became boring, they asked the 13-year-old to defecate into a shoebox and forced Fawn to eat it while smiling and telling them she was having a good time.
No.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yep.
I'm having a bad time.
I know. I didn't mean to go this dark, but I did. I was like kind of lighthearted.
Is this your fucking revenge for John Christie?
I mean,
is this your revenge for how pissed you were at John Christie?
Later, I was thinking it was. I was a little bit unhappy. I was more unhappy, I think, reading this and hearing you tell me that story. So at some point in time, she was obviously losing consciousness. They beat her at this time for about a month, almost every single day. So much so that when the 13-year-old was talking about it later, she said that she couldn't identify a specific case of when these beatings would exist because it happened so regularly, they all kind of blended together.
I mean, it speaks volumes to how much she was getting beat.
Yeah. Quote, She was broken, and playing with her wasn't so much fun after that. We carried on anyway. There wasn't anything else to do. At some point in time, she was supposedly laying on the floor in the bathroom and picking up things and putting them in tinfoil. This will come into play a little bit later.
Okay.
This was the day before she had died.
Okay.
Because, let's be fair, it's pretty obvious that she's going to die. So much you could take, there's no way. I wouldn't have lasted, I'm sure, a day. I would have been out. I would have been like, okay, and Whitney's dead.
Yeah. I don't even... I think that I truly cannot fathom being in the situation, so much so that I don't know what I would have done, but I don't imagine I could have probably made it as long as she did.
Mm-hmm. No. And it's a testament. Like, I wouldn't have. I guarantee I wouldn't have.
Smiling and trying to pretend that you're having a good time with the hopes that, like, maybe someday they'll let you go.
Right. And it's hard for me to smile when I'm not having a good time if I'm just around and about with people.
I can't even fucking smile when I'm hungover. Okay?
Oftentimes, Chan, while he was kicking and or beating her, would count aloud to scare her.
Why? What do you mean? He would count the blows?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Right. The night before she died, she was seen to be wriggling, panting, crying out, and had difficulty breathing. She, quote, looked like a junkie in withdrawal.
Okay.
During this time, they keep saying that she was on drugs and she was stealing drugs from them. That's why they were beating her.
Okay.
But there's a level of beating, I think. I think at some point in time, it's just overkill.
They crossed the fucking threshold miles ago.
Yeah. I mean, not even miles, like literally states. So they found her completely motionless the next day. The 13-year-old was the one that was actually sent to check for her vitals. There was white discharge in her nostrils, which is consistent for an OD.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Well, I looked it up. They decisively put the body in the fridge to keep it from decaying quickly. Because...
Why even fucking hold on to it?
Well, here's the thing. This wasn't a singular apartment. They were not the only ones that were there.
Okay.
There were other people that were living in the apartment and the apartments below, above, and to the sides.
This is like a apartment complex, though.
Yeah, and supposedly there were about 6 rooms in this apartment. And it wasn't just the triad members and Fawn that were there.
Okay, yeah.
So that would lend credibility why a lot of people theorize that they told her not to make any noise, and if she did, they would beat her harder. There was only one occasion that anyone called for assistance or went to check on what the noise was, and it was another night that Fawn was being beaten. It came out later in the trial that one of the members had told Chan to not beat her anymore because she was, quote, beyond the limit and couldn't stop himself. Something wrong will happen if you keep on beating her. Chan had said, supposedly, to, quote, chop it up into pieces and flush it down the toilet. So he's now no longer looking at her as a human. He's looking at the body as some sort of waste.
It's garbage. It's trash. It needs to be disposed of.
Which we'll go into in a second.
Okay.
She also was bleeding from her ear. Obviously, from trauma to the head, it's pretty consistent.
I did know that.
Yeah. There's a doctor, and I'm not going to read the whole quote just because it is a little bit long.
Okay.
All these factors, fractured ribs, injury to the lung, and bleeding into the chest cavity might have impaired the breathing capacity of an individual and caused difficulty in breathing. You've outlined to me that Fan Man Yi was observed to be short of breath and rapid breathing, and this finding could have been explained by injuries to the chest organ and the ribs. This was in an appeal bundle. There's a reason that they aren't 100% sure of exactly what happened to cause her actual death.
So the cause of death is uncertain.
It is uncertain, but it's pretty well known that it had to have been the torture. They panicked when they found out that she obviously had died, and they put her in the fridge they took everything out of the fridge, and then they placed it in their apartment, and then put her body in there. police had come for an unrelated charge of sexual abuse in the building and domestic abuse.
Oh, you mean because a 34-year-old's getting it on with a 13-year-old?
It had nothing to do with them at all, actually. It had to be with somebody else that was in the apartment building.
Sad.
Yeah. They panicked because they thought someone called the police on them and started a plan to...
I'm just very angry. Okay, go ahead.
You should be angry. It's an angry story. So because they were spooked by the police, they started their plan to dismember the body. They placed her body inside of the bathtub, drained it of the blood, and then used a handsaw to cut the body parts apart.
Okay.
They kept some of the muscle in the fridge, almost
Why?
for smell.
What, were they going to fucking eat it?
No, but there's more.
Okay.
So they kept some of the muscle in the fridge and some of her body parts as well in the fridge. They used the kitchen that they cooked their food in, oftentimes at the same time, to cook the meat from her body.
But they didn't eat it?
No. There's more. I'm sorry.
Who are they going to feed it to?
Oh, hold
They're
on.
going to feed it to somebody.
Hold on.
Oh. Describe nothing about my face right now.
I can't. I want to disassociate so bad from this.
I think that's what I'm doing. I think
Disassociating. I'm smiling at your face because both of us are really uncomfortable.
And we're both rubbing our faces.
Yep. I don't have any
Okay.
makeup on my face today. That's a positive.
And my palms are sweaty. Let's do it.
Okay. They would cook the meat from her body and most of her body parts on the stove in the kitchen of the apartment. It is said to be a fact that they would cook them while they were cooking their dinner and oftentimes use the same utensils to stir the noodles that they were cooking or the food they were cooking at the time.
Ew.
Yes. Specifically in this case, it was when they were boiling the flesh off of her head.
Okay.
In a pot, they use the same utensils back and forth between to stir the water.
I'm withholding my reaction. Continue.
Brace yourself. It's been speculated and has been said by a few different people that were involved in the case, but I can't find anything that verifies this actually happened. But that the meat that was cooked off of her body was fed to local stray dogs and to homeless in the area.
Well,
for
okay.
soup.
But the animal thing, I weirdly had a feeling that it was going there. So that was my first thought. If they weren't going to eat the meat, the stray dog thing makes sense to me. The homeless people thing,
right?
though,
They would make soups for the homeless, is what was in one of the stories I read.
At least she wound up helping people.
I guess the reason that they haven't been able to 100% determine her cause of death is because of all of the pieces of her body that were given away. Her bones were ground up, except for her skull, and only some of her internal organs, her heart, lungs, liver, and intestines, were kept as well.
Okay, so I cannot solve like a 100-piece puzzle.
In addition to boiling the flesh off of her skull, they figured that they should keep it in some way. John apparently was a really big fan of Hello Kitty and took the Hello Kitty large mermaid stuffed animal.
Okay.
And sewed her skull into it.
Like on the inside?
Yep.
Of the... Why?
Shits and gigs. It's a mermaid.
So where is her skull at?
Inside of Hello Kitty's head.
In the head?
Uh-huh.
It looks really flat though. Right?
If I were to stand up, it'd go to probably underneath my boobs. It's a
Oh.
pretty large stuffed animal.
Okay, well, that visual alone, I don't know why we didn't just open with that. You said you weren't going to ruin Hello Kitty for me.
Well, but wait, I'm gonna give you the way that this hasn't somehow gotten ruined. Hello Kitty's been ruined for me forever, so the 13-year-old comes back into play, and the reason that they have most of this information is because she confessed to police a little bit under a month, I would say, from when this had happened. When it was still a wreck, they still had a little bit of paraphernalia from Hello Kitty in there, and some of it was knockoffs. Obviously, some of it wasn't.
Yeah.
But then this doll was also in there. She had actually walked to the police station and told them this story that they had believed was completely fictitious because she's a 13-year-old and, it seems so crazy that it couldn't possibly be true, especially the fact that they had sewn